autobiographical stories and lately autofiction is a subgenre of fiction that's really interesting and also in comics. Now, I'm no expert on this field, but luckily I know someone who is. So let's see if this works. Oh, hey, it's Lars Kramhoft, who is a writer and artist, known for his autobiographical book, Something Terrible is Just About to Happen, about anxiety, loneliness, and toxic male culture. Right now, your new book is available in stores and on Instagram. It's called Working Poor. Could you tell us a little bit about what Working Poor is?
Working Poor is a story about a young writer looking for love, success, and an apartment that he can afford in Copenhagen. So obviously, it's drawing on my own experience. It sort of goes on to explore the daily experience of being like struggling and like all the ups and downs and humiliations that you experience in this situation. Working poor is if you have a job that doesn't pay enough, or you don't have hours enough to make ends meet, and so you have to have more jobs. You know, maybe when you hear that, you think about like cleaning or waiter or something, but I thought it was ironic that that actually fits being a writer as well. And I don't think people think about that. I don't know if people think that automatically once you have a book published, you know, you are rich and you have people lining up to get your autograph and stuff. And unless you're like in the top 1%, that's not the case. So I thought that was pretty relevant to talk about my own experience, because I had to have a lot of shitty jobs. Now I have better jobs, but you know, I still work a bunch of different jobs to make ends meet. It also taps into inequality on a greater level, because I don't need a lot of money. It's not like I'm complaining that I'm not rich. I never wanted to be rich, but when a 2-room apartment in Copenhagen costs 2 million kroners, then you realize that you need wealth at a whole different level just to live in a city like Copenhagen. So that became something that I started to explore, how you see inequality in, I want to say, almost on a global scale. Mm-hmm. Like some people are getting insanely rich, others can't even afford to live in a city in their own country. And also the kind of inequality that is when, you know, you're a tenant and you're living in a room and there's someone else who owns the apartment and suddenly they make the rules. Fortunately, now I have my own apartment, but I have had a lot of weird situations, and I thought I'll put that in the comic.
Comics is often full of men in capes and talking animals and stuff like that. But what is the appeal to create stories based on real life?
I think for me, comics used to be more of an escape from reality. But then I also realized that it could be a way to tackle reality head on. I'm really inspired by punk rock, and the designer, Arturo Vega, who was a designer for the Ramones, he once said that what drew him to Joey's lyrics was that Joey would almost take everything that was shitty in his life and almost celebrate it in his lyrics. That made me think, I can take all the shitty things in my life and, I'll put it in a comic.
All the shitty things in life turned into art.
Yeah, then at least you can do something with
it. That's true. So it's like recycling crap. So what are some of the concerns you had before you start using your own life as inspiration for creating comics?
Mainly if I was good enough to pull it off as an artist, actually. I sent the first couple of pages of Something Awful to Pau, who is the editor, and I basically asked him, is this good enough to publish? Because I wasn't sure. So that was actually mainly my concern, was whether I was good enough as an artist, because I had written quite a bit at that point, so I felt fairly confident as a writer, but I was actually more insecure about my artist skills.
Okay, so you weren't worried about what other people in the book would say of being, how they were presented in the book?
No, because they're all fictional. I
fictionalized, is that what you mean?
Well, no, they are fictional. Like I like to distinguish between autobiography and autofiction. It's based on real experience and things that have happened, but all the characters are made up. It's not exactly what has happened, or if people think I'm the main character, that's not the case. Of course, I use experience from my own life, but it all has to work as a fictional story. You can't excuse a boring story by saying, but that's how it happened. You know, when you start to put it down on paper, it has to adhere to the same basic rules as any kind of fiction. In a way, who cares if it's real or if it's something you experienced? Once it becomes a story and you read it, it's different. It all becomes fiction. You know what I mean?
Right. So why then base it on real life?
I mean, for me, I think it gives you a lot of material to draw on. If you take Working Poor, for instance, if I were to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to make a comic about this phenomenon, working poor. If I was going to like create a character to fit into that mold, it might be a cliche, you know, but if I use my own life, I have some authentic experience, and that gives you a whole lot of story material right there that maybe you wouldn't have thought of.
Right.
Since I've lived some of it, you know, I have like details and some insight that you couldn't make up.
So what are some considerations that that other creators need to take before they embark on doing autobiographical material or autofiction?
I think you have to be ready to be honest, of course. I think like if you just try to make yourself look like the hero, then you know I think that'll fall through. But also be conscious of what are you willing to put out there, because you know, you might find yourself on national television. You know, I went on national television to talk about depression and anxiety and going on dating classes and stuff like that. Not like I was expecting to go on television to talk about it, but I was aware that people are gonna come to me and ask me about these things. And there are things, of course, that I would not put in a book. That also leads me to another thing that I think is actually very important, is to distinguish between what is private and what is personal. Personal is the stuff that other people can relate to as well, and private is more like your dirty laundry that you don't need to show everyone. You know?
Right. Right. Yeah, your new series, Working Poor.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. That's also semi-autobiographical.
Oh yeah.
Autofiction. And it's available on Instagram, of all places, for free. Why choose that platform?
It wasn't actually part of the plan originally. I was going to publish it in the form that you see it there, as a comic book. There's going to be 4 issues, and then COVID happened, so I realized that I wasn't going to be able to go out to comic conventions and sell it, which was the plan, because there's no distribution or anything of that. It's only the sales that I can make. I had to do something else to get it out there to people. And then during the quarantine, I started to follow Simon Henselmann's Instagram, and he was putting out a strip every day. He did this book called Crisis Zone. And I became very fond of following him every day, like the first thing in the morning, just go in and read a strip. And I thought, you know, he's got thousands of followers. Like, you know, you hear people whine about nobody reads comics, and obviously a lot of people want to read comics if they are available.
Right.
And so I thought, you know, let's try putting them up on Instagram and see if anyone is gonna want to read this. And then, of course, I was fortunate because I got to go on the radio on the day that it launched and talk about it. And the followers came. So who knew? But apparently people want to read comics if they are available.
Free.
Yeah, if they're free, of course, yes.
Right.
Of course, free.
Yeah.
But, you know, some of these people who follow it for free also buy the comic when it comes out. So that's really been the great part of it, has been that, you know, after a month or 2 of the strips for free, I go out and say, hey, now the book is here. And people actually bought it. So I think that's a good lesson, actually, that, you know, you got to make stuff available to people where they are. Like, because comics aren't in kiosks or newsstands anymore. But, you know, a lot of people, especially young people, are on Instagram.
And hopefully on YouTube, so they can watch
it. Maybe both.
Maybe both. So what is one piece of advice you would give to a younger version of yourself? Something that you wish you would have known before you started out making comics? That's a very hard question, because, you know, it depends so much on where you are in a specific moment and what it is you need to hear. I mean, what I've tried to boil it down to is like study the craft,
but also figure out what is it that you got that is special. What is your unique perspective? Because you can become the best at the craft, but there's probably someone else who is better. So you got to figure out like what is it that you have that is unique for you. And that was at least the thing that really changed things for me when I started to put together like my writing and my opinions and my feelings and the limited drawing skills that I have. I think my drawing skills are very rudimentary, but when I put it together with, you know, the humor and the opinions and the observations and stuff, then I feel like I'm getting towards something that is unique for me.
So what's the best piece of advice you've gotten from anyone else in the field?
It's funny, I actually remember when I was probably 15 or something, and I was on a message board for comics. I think it was the Comic Book Resources Forum. Of course, I was making comics back then too, and I actually got in touch with Phil Hester, and he actually looked at my stuff and wrote me back, and he said, you know, you're a much better writer than artist, and your concepts are great, but your drawings aren't that good. So, you know, that was huge for me back then.
And Working Poor is in English, right? So people can read it, and so wherever they are on the interwebs.
If they're on Instagram,
the tag is at Lars Kramhoft, weird language, Danish. So that's why
I have a feeling the name and the link is going to be in the description, so maybe that's the easiest way. But yeah, you can read like 2/3 of the story on my Instagram.
Yeah. So you are saving a little bit for people who pay up.
Oh yeah, like the story still makes sense if you only read what's online. I'm not trying to like make some kind of scam where all of a sudden I leave you hanging and then you have to go and pick up the book. But I will say that, you know, you need the book to have the full experience and get to know the characters for real. So hopefully, you know, you'll want to pick it up when you've read the strips.
And I'm at Palle Schmidt on Instagram. You can follow me as well and come and say hi. I'm nowhere near as interesting as Lars here, but thanks for watching, and hopefully see you again some other time. Maybe we'll bring Lars back. Who knows?
Or someone else will appear instead.
Who knows?